Scottville, Michigan is mostly known for its regionally famous Scottville Clown Band, whose roots date back to 1903. For those who prefer their music to be much edgier, they may know it as the hometown of Tool lead singer Maynard Keenan. And while it's likely many celebrities have driven through the small town, 10 miles east of Ludington, at the intersection of US 10 and US 31 in the center of Mason County, one notable author, before he was a notable author, made his way through the farming town in 1917 on his way to the family cottage in Emmett County. I'm Rob Alway with the Great Lakes History Log, and today we will talk about the Hemingway family's road trip along Michigan's West Shore. This Great Lakes History Log is presented by Filer Credit Union, with Michigan locations in Manistee, East Lake, Bear Lake, and Ludington, and the Mason County Historical Society in Mason County, Michigan, which operates historical White Pine Village, the Port of Ludington Maritime Museum, and the Rose Hawley Archives in downtown Ludington. In the summer of 1917, 17-year-old Ernest Hemingway, along with his parents, Dr. Clarence Ed Hemingway and Grace Hemingway, and his 2-year-old brother Lester Hemingway, made their way through Mason County, Michigan on a road trip to their cottage on Walloon Lake in Emmett County. A 1999 article in Michigan History magazine, published by the Historical Society of Michigan, talks about the first time the Hemingway family decided to drive to their cottage from their home in Oak Park, Illinois. Construction of the Hemingways' cottage began in 1899, the year Ernest was born. That year, and for the next 16 seasons, they traveled by boat across Lake Michigan from their home in Oak Park to Walloon Lake. In 1917, Dr. Hemingway decided to attempt the trip by land. He would drive his Model T around the southern tip of Lake Michigan and then generally follow the lake shore northward up to the cottage. He would take his wife and their sons. The family's 4 daughters would cross Lake Michigan by boat. In 1917, US 31 did not exist. The West Michigan Lakeshore Highway Association was founded on January 10, 1912, and then reorganized in May 1913 as the West Michigan Pike Association. The group's auto trail consisted of 8-foot-tall concrete markers along a 400-mile-long roadway from the Indiana state line northward to Mackinac City. In 1913, the state trunk line highway system was created by an act of the Michigan legislature. Division 5 of the system followed a course from Niles, Michigan, northward along the Lake Michigan shoreline to Mackinac City. In 1919, the Michigan State Highway Department, now Michigan Department of Transportation, signposted the highway system. The future US 31 corridor was assigned 2 numbers, M58 from a connection with Indiana SR 1 at the state line south of Niles to M11, later US 12 in St. Joseph, and M11 from St. Joseph up the western shore of the Lower Peninsula, ending with M10, later US 23, in downtown Mackinac City. The highways basically were routes created utilizing local roads. They were rarely straight paths from point A to point B. In 1926, those 2 designations were combined into US 31. But in 1917, the route was basically a combination of local former pioneer trails. Dr. Hemingway prepared for his 1917 road trip with characteristic thoroughness, the magazine article stated. His records make little mention of expenses for breakfasts or lunches. Presumably, he packed supplies for the family to eat meals at stops beside the road. He also took equipment for the Model T, tools, spare tires, and a saw for cutting tree branches to place under the wheels for traction should the car get stuck in sand or mud. Since the Model T had no trunk, the doctor faced a problem in finding room for all the luggage. He packed much of it inside the car, making it necessary for Lester to sit on Grace's lap for most of the trip. The remaining gear was carried on the outside of the car. 2 spare tires were lashed on the driver's side and other equipment packed on the running board. Dr. Hemingway kept a sketchy diary during the 1917 trip, recording purchases, mileage from odometer readings, and the cost and location of lodgings where the family stayed overnight. Parts of the diary are difficult to decipher, but the doctor's handwriting was more legible than that of many of his profession, and his meaning is generally clear, the article stated. The diary's recorded odometer readings are an interesting feature, since odometers were not standard on Fords at the time. Evidently, Dr. Hemingway installed one of the gadgets himself. The Ford Model T was produced by the Ford Motor Company of Dearborn from October 1, 1908 to May 26, 1927. It is generally regarded as the first mass-affordable automobile, which made car travel available to middle-class Americans. The relatively low price was partly the result of Ford's efficient fabrication, including assembly line production instead of individual handcrafting. The Model T has a front-mounted 177 cubic inch inline four-cylinder engine, producing 20 horsepower for a top speed of 42 miles per hour. According to Ford Motor Company, the Model T had fuel economy of 13 to 21 miles per gallon. The engine was designed to run on gasoline, although it may also have been able to run on kerosene or ethanol. The first day of travel was fairly uneventful. The family traveled 137 miles and reached Watervliet, Michigan, in Berrien County. The family spent the night at the Bayview Hotel on Paw Paw Lake. The second day, the family made it 105 miles to Whitehall in Muskegon County, where they stayed at Mrs. Johnson's lodging house. They bought gasoline from Sorensen's Standard Oil Station, located on what is now 116 East Colby Street in downtown Whitehall. On the third day, the Model T's tires went flat during the night while the car stood outside Mrs. Johnson's tea room. Mechanical problems developed as well, delaying the family's departure from Whitehall. The Hemingways stopped in Hart in Oceana County about noon, buying postcards for 15 cents and spending 40 cents for gum and two other items not clearly named. Mechanical difficulties continued, for the family logged only 65 miles during an 8-hour day. On the fourth day, Dr. Hemingway's journal states the family left Scottville at 7 a.m., making it likely that they spent the night in Scottville. Where the family stayed isn't quite clear. The Scottville Hotel, later known as Hunter's Inn, was located at 107 South Main Street on the east side of the street, just south of the main intersection of State and Main Streets. It was more than likely the only hotel in Scottville. The building later became Maddox Hardware and Furniture Store and burned to the ground following an explosion on Sunday, June 9, 1957. Historical records talk about the Hotel Andre, located on the northeast corner of State and Main Streets. It was built in 1880 but was destroyed by fire in 1912. In 1917, Scottville had been incorporated as a city for 10 years. It had electrical streetlights for 17 years, and its streets and sidewalks had been paved for 7 years. In 1910, the city celebrated the paving of the streets by holding an ox roast, which became a tradition for the next 12 decades until it ended in 2016, 99 years after the Hemingways came through town. My great-grandparents, Walter and Evelyn Alway, built their house on North Main Street in 1914. In 1917, my grandfather Tom would have been 6 years old. I should note that I continued to live in Scottville in that same home. It's just interesting to think about how the future famous novelist spent the evening in our little town, his family then zipping past our family's ancestral home on their way north. Once that Model T left the city limits of Scottville, it encountered a road that would be a challenge for modern-day all-wheel drive vehicles. The first road to head north of Scottville was established in 1875 and eventually made its way to Manistee. This road evolved into a portion of the West Michigan Pike and eventually was developed into the modern US 31. The Michigan History Magazine article stated, but at some point the road, or one the Hemingways mistakenly took, became rutted and the overloaded Model T broke a spring. The article also stated that not until 10:30 p.m. did the doctor and his weary family reach the home of his brother George at Ironton, the Uncle George of Ernest Hemingway's short stories. Ironton is located southeast of Charlevoix on the shores of Lake Charlevoix. Scottville native and local history buff George Wilson said he recalled farmer Ed Sakinas talking about how his father William would make some extra cash hauling cars out of the mud holes on the West Michigan Pike in front of the family farm, which is located on modern US 31 near Freeman Road. The Stacanis farm was founded in 1920, just 3 years after the Hemingways passed by that location, which means that Mr. Stacanis didn't offer a hand to the Hemingway family. Ed Stacanis suggested that perhaps his dad made sure the puddles and bogs never fully dried out. The Stacanis farm continues to operate under its third and fourth generations. On the fifth day, after spending the night at George Hemingway's house, the family reached their cottage. After a good night's sleep, as Grace Hemingway gratefully recorded, they had their picture taken along with members of the George Hemingway family and the Model T. That afternoon, the family drove to Windmere, their cottage on Walloon Lake, adjoining Bacon's farm. The Model T must have been performing poorly, for the drive of 31 miles took 4 hours, but they were home at last. A review of the trip shows that the Hemingways spent a total of $11.95 for hotels and meals. The Model T consumed 22 gallons of gasoline, averaging 20 miles per gallon. It used 2 gallons of oil. The total cost of gas and oil was $8.32. In notes for a future trip by car, the doctor suggested a route from Chicago to Michigan City, to St. Joseph to Muskegon, to Manistee to Traverse City, and added the names of hotels recommended by GRH, presumably his brother George. Dr. Hemingway did not repeat the trip. Once was enough. In the fall of 1917, he shipped the Model T back home from Manistee aboard the SS Missouri. In following summers, he spent increasing amounts of time in Oak Park and needed the car for making medical calls. But he must have felt satisfaction in knowing that he once had overcome the hazards of the roads from Oak Park to Petoskey. Ernest Hemingway never referred in his fiction to the 1917 trip, but he preserved memories of it. In 1919, writing from Boyne City to his friend Howell Jenkins on plans for a fishing trip, Ernest advised Jenkins on what route to take when driving north. Quote, "The best road to come up is the West Michigan Pike. It is pretty good. It comes through Michigan City and up the shore through Muskegon, Ludington, Manistee, Traverse City, and then up to Charlevoix. You can drive it in less than 3 days, probably in 2 days," unquote. Thank you for listening to this edition of Great Lakes History Log, brought to you by Filer Credit Union and the Mason County Historical Society. This podcast is a production of Sabo Points Media, a nonprofit news and information service, in partnership with Media Group 31's Mason County Press. This podcast is copyrighted.